We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast, brought to you by 7M Ventures and Andrew Wommack Ministries.
Well, welcome to our Monday night Truth and Liberty broadcast. We were just a minute or two late coming on, but praise God we're here and we got a stacked program tonight. We got Leah Carawan here with us, and also remoting in from Washington, D.C. is Randy Forbes. And man, we're blessed to have you with us again, Randy. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this.
Well, thank you, Andrew. It's always a blessing to be with you.
And so I'm going to let Karen give all of the background, and she does a better introduction than I do. I just say this is Leah and this is Randy, but Karen will give you all of the details. And she's also going to tell you how you can interact and be a part of this. We will be taking questions and answering those. And we also get this broadcast on CTN. They rebroadcast it during the week. So there is multiple things. We have people that come in and get on the website and watch the archive. So altogether, we have 20, 30, I don't know how many people, thousands and thousands of people. And also, you need to let them know that if you are watching on some other format, we've been having, I think it's Google, just cut us. Anytime we start saying something that is not politically correct, we lose half of our audience. So how can they avoid this, Karen? Tell them how they can watch the whole thing.
All right. Well, welcome, everybody. We're so glad that you joined us tonight for Truth and Liberty. And as Andrew described, we have had some issues with Facebook cutting our feed is what we're seeing. And so we want to encourage you that you can watch this broadcast in its entirety live at truthandliberty.net. And we completely control that feed. And so if you're watching, go ahead over to truthandliberty.net and please share this with your friends and family. I'll tell you, the information that we're going to be sharing tonight and really every week is absolutely critical. And so we know you're going to enjoy the program. So I want to give you a few updates before we get started. We've got so many exciting things that are happening right here at this ministry. And so this weekend is a big weekend, and I'll tell you what, you should come out for the whole thing. We've got 3 events in one weekend. So Friday night we have King David, which is the world premiere. It's an amazing musical. They've been rehearsing.
Yeah, I was just at the rehearsal a while ago, and the filming that they've got on this huge LED screen, it's 20 feet tall and 40 feet wide. And the filming is professional. It's just amazing. You're going to love it.
Amazing. It's really Broadway quality. And it's right here at the new auditorium, which seats 3,200. So we've got plenty of room for you, and we just got an approval for some expansion on seats for this weekend. So Friday night, and if you want to register and purchase tickets, you can go to thekingofjerusalem.com. Then on Saturday, we have the building dedication with Jesse Duplantis and Kenneth Copeland. That's going to be a very, very special day.
That's going to be packed out. We've already got, I forgot how many, 2,800 that have registered, and we're going to have more than that. So it'll be full.
It's going to be full. And then on Sunday, we've got the event 2018. And I'll tell you, that's really closely tied. That's Truth and Liberty and Andrew Wommack Ministries is one of the partners in this event. It's held right here at the auditorium in Woodland Park, right at Charis Bible College. And Andrew is co-hosting this with Tony Perkins. And we've got Governor Mike Huckabee that is coming as our special guest and many other guests. And we are really going to stir everybody up for the midterm elections. You don't want to miss that. Now, you can join that 2 ways. You can actually join our live audience here, and that's been filling up too. We have almost 2,000 that's already registered. So if you are in the area or if you want to come to see that live, you'll want to go to truthandliberty.net, click on register for the event, and make sure that you pre-register because it's high security. So we're not going to be able to let people come in that have not previously registered. So again, truthandliberty.net. We also want to encourage you, if you are an organization or a church and you want to be part of this, we are live casting over hundreds of platforms across America. So you can go to theevent2018.com and you can register to be a partner and you can host that live stream. Or if you want to watch it from home, you can watch it right from truthandliberty.net. Also, as Andrew mentioned, we want to hear from you. This is, we have interaction. So we visit for about a half hour, and then we take questions. And I'll tell you, some of the questions, Richard, wouldn't you agree that the audience is coming up with, they are very, very good
Now,
questions.
I didn't introduce Richard, but he's a
it's
regular
okay.
for those of you who watch. And this
Yes.
is Richard Harris, and Richard is our resident lawyer.
Yes, he
He was a
is.
practicing lawyer before he came to Bible school, but now he helps direct our practical government school, or our school of practical government.
The first way you said it was right.
All right, practical. I always
Yeah,
do.
Yes.
it's good.
Anyway, he is a blessing, and I just say things in generalities. He puts it all down, and he'll tell you the day and the number of the bill and stuff.
And he's responsible for all these
Yes,
articles.
look at all of the stuff, research that he does. And let me also say that if you go to our truthandliberty.net website, all of this material and the current events and the
Yes.
things that are happening, all of this is on our website. And Richard is the one that provides that content. And I mean, we've got hundreds, maybe thousands of pages. Plus, we link to other
Yes.
sites. Like, for instance, during the midterms, you can go and find out exactly who's running, all the way down to like school board in your area. It will give a voter guide, all of these kind of things. And so we want you to get out and participate.
That's right.
Richard's
We do.
responsible for all of
He
that.
is. He's awesome.
It's a pleasure.
So if you want to submit questions, if you are watching on truthandliberty.net, you can enter the question right in the chat next to the video, and we've got a whole team that is standing by that's ready to bring those forward into the iPad. If you're watching this on social media, you can ask the question right there in the comment section. And I always want to let you know that this is a viewer-supported broadcast. And so if Truth and Liberty has been a blessing to you, if this is something that you want to sow into, we want to encourage you to give, and you can do that at truthandliberty.net, and you can click on donate, and we are so appreciative. We've really been getting a lot of support, and we thank you for that. Also, to keep up with Truth and Liberty and updates, I want to encourage you to subscribe at truthandliberty.net, and you'll get on our email list, and you'll also be eligible to win a prize every week. And so last week, I want to congratulate Kim Gormley, who actually won Andrew's book, Living in the Balance of Grace and Faith. And then tonight, Andrew, we're giving away your book, God Wants You Well. And you always sign these for them, too.
Let me sign it.
Great.
So this will be hot off the press. Go ahead.
That's awesome. So again, to be eligible for that, just go ahead and register, and we want to be a blessing to you. So we've got also people, we've got about every state represented tonight. I want to welcome you. We've got Oklahoma, North Carolina, Alabama, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and many more. And this has become an international broadcast. We have people from all over the world that are joining us. As a matter of fact, last week we had someone from the UK, and that was fascinating.
Yes,
I mean,
it
really
was.
good insight. You want to go to the archives and watch
She
that.
was at my ministers' conference in the
Andrea
UK,
Williams, yeah.
and Andrea, and
Oh, so
she
good.
is awesome. I mean, I was ministering in the ministers' conference about how preachers are responsible for the way our society goes, and I was telling them that
Very good.
we've been intimidated. We've
right.
got, and I mean, I was really strong, and some of them were back on their heels. Then Andrea comes in the next day. She wasn't at the meeting the night before. She didn't know what I said, and she got up and basically humiliated every pastor in there because you haven't done your part.
Wow.
And she didn't know and it was just, it was awesome. And so I said, we got to get you on Truth and Liberty. And
Yes.
she's a good lady.
It was really, really good. And so you can watch the archives. If you missed any of the past episodes, you can go right to truthandliberty.net, click on archives, and watch that.
And let me just apologize for how long all of our introductions are, but there's so much happening. I could tell you about, I just spent 2.5 weeks overseas, and we saw tens of thousands of people change. But we need to get on with what we're
We
doing.
Wonderful.
do.
It's
We
wonderful.
absolutely do.
Yes.
And so we just want to welcome you, former Congressman Forbes and Leah. And you're with the organization Faith Impact Network. And Andrew, you always kind of turn it over to people to give their own bio and tell them to us about them.
Because they do a better job than I do.
They do.
So who are you, Leah?
Who am I? Who am I? Well, I'm the executive director of the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation, and Faith Impact Network is something we're very excited to tell you about. It's also a component of what we're doing at the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation. And just in a nutshell, we've built the largest network of elected leaders, federal and state elected leaders who are united to take an impact for faith. It's a unique network, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. We have so much more to tell you about that. And then Congressman Randy Forbes is the president of the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation and the founder of the Congressional Prayer Caucus, which is the organization the group of congressmen who started this whole thing.
And this isn't just federal Congress. This is state and local, all those.
That's right. It started with the congressional members, about 100 members of Congress now that are part of the Congressional Prayer Caucus, but they were having such tremendous victories. And of course, I'll let Congressman Forbes talk about this if he'd like, but then we realized we need to go to where the battle is being raged, which is at the state and community levels. And so we built a network across states. Now we have 33 states who are part of this, and many more that are will be joining as a part of this network.
And I get your emails every week, and it's amazing the things that you're doing. So, Randy, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, Andrew, first of all, let me thank you guys for the great work that you do and for your friendship and just letting me be with you tonight. And all the exciting things Karen was just talking about, all the listeners today or tonight have a lot of great opportunities to do something to make a real difference on our country. As Leah mentioned, we began with the Congressional Prayer Caucus and just cut to the chase on what that was. You know, you pay a huge price today to walk in faith, and it's probably the toughest fight that any of us have, both the fight for our personal faith, but also the fight for faith across the country. And what we realized is if you're going to pay that price, you want to make sure you're having the most impact you can possibly have. And we realized that coming together as elected leaders, that we could do our own thing, we could walk our own path just by ourselves. But if we could find a way to come together and use that collective wisdom, the collective knowledge of the scriptures, the collective experiences that we all had, to put that together for our faith and truly use the right strategies, that we could make a huge difference in our country. And that grew to where we had 100 members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate. And all of a sudden, we started seeing enormous changes, enormous impacts that took place. And that birthed really the similar thing across the states, where we're now in 33 states across the country who have legislative prayer caucuses, and almost 1,000 state officials coming together again to make that kind of impact in their country. And from there, it went to mayors, to police chiefs, to fire chiefs across the board. And we recognized, Andrew, that if we could begin to come together and put our differences aside and say, how do we fight this fight for faith? How do we train for it? How do we walk in it? But then also, how do we come together and use the wisdom, the experiences of each other? Look at what we could do across the country. And that's what really brought into being the Faith Impact Network now. So we have an entire division that is fighting nothing but getting in God we trust across the country. We've got groups meeting to see what kind of strategies we can use in Hollywood. We have other groups that are looking at the laws that we can get passed, groups looking at how we protect and strengthen our judges. And then the final thing, Andrew, as you know, it is not just elected leaders, it is everybody across this country. If we come together, we can make a huge difference. So we literally are creating faith impact groups across America, 5, 6, 12, 15 men and women coming together to pray, to share with all of this network so that we can have the right strategies, the right alliances, and truly make an impact on the country that we believe God birthed to have an important place in the world.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for what you're doing, man. This is awesome to see people in politics doing this. And, you know, I just have been through probably 200 emails over the weekend. I'm catching up from being gone from the country for 2.5 weeks. And I forget exactly when you sent it out, but I think I just read one over the weekend where you participated in an amicus brief, where you are now this coach that because he took a knee, lost his job, and you are getting involved in that legislation.
Yes.
I heard today that the court has actually reconferenced again on whether to grant cert in that case, which, Congressman, that's a really good sign.
That's right.
That's huge, Richard. And, you know, again, these are battles that we can sit on the sidelines, Andrew, or we can get in the fight. And I don't care where you are in this country, there's something you can do. and we can have an impact. And you know, our studies and what we've seen is 10% of the people in any country in the world can change that country.
Absolutely.
If they have the right strategies, if they persevere, and if they will just find a way to put their differences aside and come together. And that's what we're seeing happening across this country.
Well, you know, I learned from David Barton that I think during the American Revolution, there was 50% of the people that were totally indifferent about it. 25% of the people were for the British, and the revolution was basically waged and fought and won by 25% of our population.
Yep.
Well, you know,
That's
Andrew, David would even say that number is smaller, about 25%. You're exactly right, were people that supported the revolution, but really only 10% of the population ever did anything in the fight, just 10%.
Yeah.
And that really hasn't changed much today. 10% of the people in this country can change this country. We just have to find that 10%, get them together, the right strategies, the right commitment, and watch the Lord how he can change our country around.
And this brings up an issue that's really timely right now because we are coming up on the midterms, and traditionally the midterms are such low voter turnouts
That's right.
that you could have a very small number
Yes.
of people that could make the difference. And so, Leah, why don't you just discuss what's on the line in the midterms? What's going to happen if the liberals gain back the Senate and the House? What's happening?
Well, there is so much at stake right now in these midterm elections because, as you can see, you heard just the kind of impact that these government leaders could have if they're in positions of authority at such a time as this. If we have people who actually believe in the biblical values and the traditions of our nation, if they actually live and put biblical values in the policies and the laws that they put forth, if they think with a biblical worldview, it's a game changer. And those are the kinds of people that we want in positions of authority.
And I've heard that if the Democrats win back any seats in the Senate, and if they win the House, that one of the first orders they have pledged, they would impeach Trump and Kavanaugh. And I mean, start obstructing everything that the president wants to do, which they've already been doing. I mean, it would just grind our government to a halt basically for the next 2 years. And anybody who saw the Kavanaugh confirmation and the antics that the liberals did, I'm even hearing that there's a lot of Democrats now that are deserting just because they do not want
Yes.
people to
associated
be
with
that way. It's violent.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's vicious. So anyway, these midterms are super important, and man, we need to turn out. And again, a small number of voters can make a huge difference during these midterms. So
exactly
man,
right.
you need to register, you need to get out, you need to vote, and you need to vote informed.
And even in the lower community elections, it's even a narrower margin.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of these things are happening at the city councils, the school boards, all of the places in which real decisions are made in your community. And those elections can be won with just tens and hundreds of people that will turn out.
And
So
most
it's
people
all
don't
the way across the
understand.
board.
They don't understand, but these school boards are sometimes very, very small turnouts.
Very small.
And yet they're the ones that establish the curriculum.
Right.
Like I just read, I forget the details, maybe Richard knows this, but I just read over the weekend one of the emails that they are now actually educating 5-year-olds and teaching them gender identity that they get to choose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's starting in kindergarten now.
That's on the local level that this is happening. There hasn't been federal things that are doing this, and so if you get involved, you can affect your school board and make a difference in all this.
That's right.
We've got a student in the practical government school that had a battle in the high school where his kids were here in Woodland Park over inappropriate sex education that was going on. And he went in and challenged him. He said, "What are you doing teaching on this subject? It has nothing to do with science. This is nothing but indoctrination." And that's what we need to be doing, is taking a stand. And you guys are doing a great job of that, sounds like.
I tell you what, we have a reprieve. I really believe that God has granted the church an opportunity for revival. Now, the government's not going to produce revival, but they can certainly get out of the way and quit hindering it. And I believe that Trump has given us an opportunity, and unless we take advantage of this, if we lose any ground in the midterms, it would be devastating. And Randy, I know that this is one of the things that you guys are pushing so hard, but these midterm elections are absolutely vital that we turn
Andrew,
out the conservatives.
I've studied this, lived it for almost 30 years now. And, one of the things oftentimes I'll see a Christian who has a child that perhaps is not doing what they want to do, or perhaps has taken a turn for the worst in their lives. And the first question I just ask them, not in any kind of judgmental fashion, but I just say, how much have you prayed for that child? And oftentimes you get this dumbfounded look because they haven't prayed at all. And when we come into these elections, Paul told us we needed to pray for people in authority. And then James said, if you just tell them to go, be fed, and you don't do anything, that's not enough. And in these elections, for one of the few times in our lifetime, every single individual who's a voter in this country can make a difference. There are three things. First of all, we need to remember that about 60 House seats today are going to be won possibly by 1 percentage point. That's huge in the impact that the average voter can make. But here's what's going to happen if this House flips. If the Senate flips, you won't get another conservative judge for the rest of this administration. And that's pretty clear that would happen. The second thing, though, is this. If the House flips, you're right. It's not just going to be trying to impeach the president. It's going to be one investigation after the other, which is going to just absolutely gridlock the country. But the thing that I really worry about is the judiciary, and I also worry about our national defense. We are seeing Russia and China grow like we've never seen them grow militarily. We are starting for the first time in almost a decade to rebuild our defense. And almost everybody in Washington agrees. If we lose these midterm elections, they will begin cutting national defense, which would be a tragedy for this country. But the last thing that I just want to put out for all of your viewers and why this is so important is, people of faith realize that when we talk about in God we trust, that's not just a slogan we put on the wall. It is crucial for this reason. We are the only country in the world that when we put in God we trust up, we dare to say that the state is not the end all, that there's something more important than the state. Whatever it is, however you define it, it is important for this country to realize that we still stand for something greater than the United States Congress or the United States Senate as in terms of the importance of our nation. That's why when you walk into a federal building and you see a picture of the president and the vice president and the secretary, that's not just for their ego. It's to tell everybody working in that building, this building doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the people of the United States, and this is the chain of command. These are the people that the people have elected to run this country. When we have in God we trust up on our walls, we are saying to the rest of the world in this country, that chain of command is greater than any particular political committee or any legislature. We don't want to lose that. And that literally could be at stake with the outcome of these elections.
And Randy, it's my perception that the liberals are so incensed with Trump and the positive things that he's been doing that, they are mad. They are going to turn out probably in record numbers. Plus, traditionally, from my understanding, in the off election year of the president is when the other party traditionally resurges and stuff. So we've got things stacked against us. And if the liberals do turn out in record numbers, we need the conservatives. It was the evangelical vote that put Trump into office. And unless those same people turn out in these midterms, we could stand to lose all of the ground that we've gained.
Andrew, I always use, in our neck of the woods, the big worry we always have are hurricanes. And when you see these hurricanes approaching the coast, you always have these projection lines as to where the hurricane is going to hit. And they start narrowing and converging as they get closer and closer to the time of impact. Well, that's happening now with the elections. But the one thing they cannot measure, they've never learned how to do it, and that is they can't measure the intensity that hurricane's going to have when it actually hits. And that intensity is everything. It determines so much about the impact of that hurricane. Well, that's what's true right now. We know the left is going to turn out. because they are very intense. They hate this president. They hate the things that he's done. The question that we have up in the air is whether or not people of faith, people who believe in the right kind of judiciary, the right kind of national defense, the right kind of laws in our country, if they are going to turn out to vote, it is in their hands. That's why they need to get up. They need to go out. They need to cast that vote. This election is going to make a huge difference, not just for their lives, but for their children and their grandchildren.
And
So,
I wanted to just throw out something too. I don't think that people understand, people of faith, of what's happening in this administration that is so different and so radical and wonderful for us. And that is that every month I'm actually on a phone call with another agency, a faith and opportunity agency, where they are literally pulling in 150 of the leaders of the faith movement who are there to brainstorm, to have a conversation, to talk about ways in which the people of faith in this country can actually have an impact and help to bring solutions to poverty and immigration, and how do we bring biblical values and traditional and these kinds of principles to bear in the leadership and in making decisions for this country.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That has not
and
happened in that
President
way
Trump
ever.
has appointed Sam Brownback. I had lunch with
Yes,
him,
yes.
and as far as I know, I don't think other presidents have done something like this. He's
it's
what's
incredible.
his official title?
International Religious
Ambassador for Religious Freedom.
Yeah, and I mean, they not only are impacting us here, but they were responsible for getting this pastor
right.
released
Yeah.
from
Pastor Brunson.
And every agency, every single agency has somebody, an office or an individual that's responsible to ensure that people of faith and religious freedom. But this is different this year, this presidency too, because he consolidated all of them and put them underneath himself, the White House, and said, we're serious about this. We're not
that's
interested in you
fantastic.
just all being out there and then falling flat. We want to
Right.
make sure that you're actually
Support.
doing something for that. And
And you-
that's big.
And you know, every time we get to talking like this, I'll have somebody saying, but how can you defend what President Trump has done, and his sexual escapades or whatever? I'm not defending Trump at all.
right.
And there's a lot of things you can't defend. I hate to say it, but sometimes the only time I think he opens his mouth is to change feet. He just tweets and says things that you shouldn't be saying. But if you look at actions, I don't think that there is another president in my lifetime that is as pro-Christian.
Right.
And it's not only Christian. It's like you were saying, Randy, about the military. He has made huge strides. Whereas the military has been decreasing, now he is putting billions of dollars back into that. Israel, he moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which they passed that in 95, but no president had the guts to enforce the law that was done. And the economy. You know, that's not a Christian issue, but man, he has taken away the government restrictions, lessened the taxes, and because of it, our economy is growing at a rate that there's just
No
so
one
many
saw
good
coming.
things
Yeah.
that he's doing I just don't want to lose it. We need to maintain this momentum. It's awesome.
I agree. Well, that's great. I guess one of the things that I thought, Leah, would be helpful is you talk about the Faith Impact Network and Congressman Forbes as well. Specifically, how can people connect with you? And when you're talking about the things at the very local level, I think that's where a lot of people are like, I need some help.
Sure.
How do I get involved?
Absolutely. Well, let me give you an example. In fact, Congressman Forbes brought it up, the In God We Trust. So very strategically, the Congressional Prayer Caucus members initiated House Resolution 13, and they reaffirmed In God We Trust as their national motto. And then they added a line to it which said, encourage the public display of it in every school and government building. Well, this is very strategic. So what we did is that we implemented then In God We Trust Put It Up initiative. And so we brought together all of our congressional leaders, and now over 24 states have also, our state legislators have passed In God We Trust legislation, and many of them have included and required it to go up in the public schools. It's very difficult to tell a student that you can't talk about God when In God We Trust is across their classroom.
That's right.
And so then what we've done is that we worked with our allies and our networks. We put together the toolkit and said, this is how you can get it up in your schools. This is how law enforcement agencies are now putting it up in their decals. Over 26 states have it on their vehicles or on their uniforms. And what we do is we provide these toolkits in addition to, so we also have almost 3 million decals and displays up
We
all
put
across
out
the nation.
thousands of them
That's
through
right.
our staff at
That's right.
school.
And
And
you-
we've got a huge banner, "In God We Trust," lit up in our auditorium.
Well, we send that picture out trying to encourage the other churches and other organizations. Look at
follow
what
suit.
Andrew Wommack is doing. And God we trust up permanently on your auditorium. So that's one example of one of the faith impact opportunities that we provide people to do. So at the local level, you're able to get it up in your school or
So can
city
you give
council.
your web address
Sure.
so that
So-
people can take advantage?
You can go to cpcfoundation.com, and right on the front there's a banner that you can join the Faith Impact Network. And what will happen is you'll get an opportunity to receive a Faith Impact Guide. You can be part of a Faith Impact group that Congressman Forbes was talking about, which is a handful of people that come together. And that's just one of the opportunities that we've provided that we've seen tremendous success. There's things that are related to prayer. There's things that are related to helping the state legislators pass religious freedom legislation. We're not a lobbying group, but we've been able to provide a menu of opportunities for our state legislators, and through Project Blitz. And in that situation, we gave our legislators a report that had best practice legislation. We pulled together our allies and our legal experts and our legislators, and we said, what is the best way in which these legislators to be able to pass religious freedom legislation? Like I said, brought in our allies partners, many of these citizens, and the success in 1 year, it went almost 750% increase from 4 pieces of legislation to over 30 pieces of legislation that were passed all across this nation in
Yeah,
1
that's
year
great.
because of the
That's fantastic.
consolidated effort
So
and strategy.
hopefully my
And-
team here can put up this address on the screen, cpcfoundation.com.
That's right.
And if you could put that on the screen.
Just
that
give
way
us your
people can
name, and
go
we'll
to it.
make sure you're looped into our network, and we'll make sure that we equip you.
Okay, so within the next few minutes, we need to start taking some questions.
a lot
But
of questions.
Randy, do you have anything you'd like to add to our
Yeah,
discussion?
the only thing I would say, Andrew, is this, that we understand so many of your viewers have busy lives. They're being pulled in so many different directions. They have to get their children to school. They're working to make a living. They're having to cut grass. They're doing all the kinds of things that makes life special, but that we have to do to keep it going. And they don't oftentimes have the time to sit down and develop these kind of strategies that'll really make an impact on their communities or on their country. And what we try to do with the Faith Impact Network is to get the best people we can from across the country and say, let's develop those strategies and then pull them down to where any one of your viewers can just reach up and say, I can do that, and pull that and start implementing that. As they do it, that overall collective impact starts moving this country. They can stop one of us. They can attack one of us. But when you start getting millions and millions of Christians across this country doing these kinds of things, it is almost impossible for them to put the brakes on that. That's what's going to turn this country around.
Amen. And you know, one of the mistakes that
That's
we've made is we
fantastic.
just look to only our elected officials, and that's
right.
just a very few people. And it's really the individuals that are going to
That's right.
turn this
It
all
is.
around. So, and thank you for watching us. And we want to take some of your questions and give you an opportunity to ask Congressman Forbes or Leah here some
Yeah,
questions.
great. So we've got a lot of questions coming in, and they're very good questions. And I'm going to start with Ghostwriter 316. That's the name on chat. And the question is, this may be towards you, Congressman. Why would you need national defense if you have open borders? What would there be to defend?
Well, that's a great
question.
question.
Great question.
And that's one of the things we didn't talk about, but that's the definition of sovereignty.
Right.
You know, can you imagine if a foreign country said, we're going to invade you tomorrow? Americans would just get up in arms and say, oh, what do we got to do? We have to stop them, make sure they don't land on our shores and bring their soldiers in here. But yet we let them sit back and say, oh, but if thousands of them want to just say we're going to come into your country, whether you want us or not, whether you have had laws that allow us to or not, that we're just going to step back and let them do that. And that really is at stake in these elections as well. So I agree with your viewer, Karen, that it's important for us to have boundaries and that we can protect as a nation, borders that we can protect as a nation. But equally important, let me just tell you, my expertise was national defense. I taught at the Naval War College last year. One of the things that I just want to plead with people about, we do not as a nation want to wake up one day and say, oh my gosh, we let China, we let Russia get stronger than us, and now we can't win in one of these contests, because that is when all the other things we worry about start paling in comparison. And that's a direction we could be headed if we're not very, very careful.
And let me just add that, it's called illegal immigration.
Yeah.
Nobody's against immigration, but illegal immigration. And Trump is the first president that is just going to enforce the law. And no brainer. People say, but there are people here that are, separated from their children. They're in desperate needs. They need food. Well, if you feel that way, why don't you just invite the homeless to come into your home and start eating your food and sleeping in your bed and do all this, and just open up your house and let them come in?
Yeah.
That's basically what it amounts to. It is ridiculous. It is hypocritical. Illegal immigration should be illegal and not encouraged. That's my 2 cents.
That's really good.
2 cents.
It's worth more than 2 cents.
It is.
I would just say, we've seen in the last 2 years since the 16 elections, now the roots of it go a lot further back than that, but we've seen the left-wing, far left-wing elements in the Democratic Party really ascend to the dominance. And leadership in that party is saying things that are just shocking, advocating actually for open borders and, a government.
And advocating violence, too.
Violence and all these things. And, and if you don't think that these midterm elections are going to have consequences, think again, because that, along with a whole number of national defense and everything else, is on the line.
The liberals are comparing the social things that are going on now to the civil rights movement. But Martin Luther King would be rejected by the liberals today because he preached obeying the law, passive resistance, not violence and things like that.
That's
and
right.
I guarantee you, they have gone into the lunatic fringe.
Yeah.
And I don't apologize for saying that. I mean, it's just terrible. The things they did to Judge Kavanaugh, anybody who would do that. Let me just read this real quickly. I had this, but in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15, these are some of the scriptures that our forefathers based this nation on. And it says, one witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity or for any sin, in any sin that he sinneth. At the mouth of 2 witnesses or at the mouth of 3 witnesses shall the matter be established. And this was quoted multiple times. Jesus even referred to this exact verse. Mm-hmm. And our nation was based on you're innocent until proven guilty. And yet with Kavanaugh, they had unsubstantiated things. Matter of fact, the witnesses that they so-called said would confirm it disproved this Dr. Ford's accusations. So it should have never even been brought up because there was no confirming evidence. And the rest of this chapter goes on to say that if a false witness comes up and accuses somebody without collaborating evidence, then you do to them the thing that they thought to have done to the person they accused, which means that all of those who allowed this unsubstantiated allegations, they should all be kicked out of Congress, according to Scripture.
Wow, Andrew.
That's exactly what the Word says.
Wow, that's powerful. So a little bit of a follow-up on this. There is a lot of questions about the border tonight. I think it's really on people's mind. And so this is from Cowboy on Chat. And he's wondering, what is the climate in Washington, D.C. to support protecting our national border from the well-publicized invasion? And what are the facts to your knowledge regarding the financial support and type of people that are in this, quote, caravan?
Well, I'll try to answer that. The key thing that we're seeing here in Washington is it depends on pretty much which side of the aisle that you sit on. One of the things that people don't realize is that if you have a flip in this House and if the Democrats take over, it doesn't just have those members, but it means a complete change in staff. It means a complete change in who is going to control the legislation. A chairman of a committee determines which legislation is going to come up and which legislation is not going to come up, and they do that almost exclusively. If we see this flip change, I don't think you're going to find very much support at all for building a wall or having any kind of protection against protecting our borders. Andrew hit the nail on the head when he said this. Right now, it is the far left that is controlling most of the Democratic Party agenda. They will be the people that are going to be in leadership, and you're going to see it being a very, very difficult thing to support the president or the administration on trying to put any kind of enforcement on the borders that we currently have.
Congressman Forbes, part of that question that you didn't address was they said something about where's the funding for this coming from. Do you believe that we have billionaires or rich people in America who are instigating all of this stuff just for political reasons?
We don't have much question that we see that not just on this movement, but in many of the protests and many of the things we see around the country. It's pretty well documented that on many of these confrontations with members of Congress that are taking place, these are all funded activities. These aren't some individual that just spontaneously came up and said, oh my gosh, I'm upset, I'm going to confront one of these senators. Oftentimes they're paid, they're trained to do that. I believe that that's what we're seeing in this caravan to a very large degree.
So they're paying these people because this has a political advantage to them. It makes it look like the American people are supporting open borders.
And remember, Andrew, you don't have to pay them all. You just have to have that catalyst group that is funded, trained in how to do it. We saw some films, and I was actually in the Senate on some of these protests on Kavanaugh, and they were literally, telling them what to say. It was almost humorous if it wasn't so serious, but they would in unison say, now we're going to walk. And they'd all say, now we're going to walk. And then we're saying, to Senator so-and-so's office, to Senator so-and-so's office. It was all orchestrated. It was all manufactured. And yet when people watch it at home, they think it was just kind of a spontaneous event.
I would think, let's go.
Well, and I think, again, it was almost nice to see, on one hand, it finally getting through to people that is exactly what's happening all across this nation, has been happening for a decade across this nation. Many of these protests, many of these movements that we've seen over the last decade have not only been funded by a few billionaires, but there's about 100 organizations that have been funded, and a massive network, strategic, outraising funds to us 10 to 1, the kinds of strategy, the kinds of resources, the kind of people that they're involved with this. And much of what you see that seems organic is not organic at all. And how do you get that information out to the people? It's very difficult because most people don't
through this
realize.
broadcast.
That's exactly right. And thank goodness you're here. Right? Yeah. Because most people say, well, how do I find that information out? When I'm talking to them, they can hardly believe their ears because they have no concept or context for something so organized and aggressively anti-faith and anti-God and anti-American. They can hardly believe that's happening, and it is.
The average Christian does not want to believe that this is true because we try and be positive and try and extend mercy towards people. But I guarantee you, if Trump hasn't drained the swamp, he's at least lowered the level to where a lot of the critters are coming out. You can see them. And I think he has revealed a corruption. Yeah. And the Democratic Party, used to, they would hide themselves and present themselves as moderates, but when they got elected, throw off the restraints and do what? They now have come out of the closet. And they are presenting themselves as anti-God. And I know that people may struggle with this, but I tell you, the Democratic Party, I am not Democrat nor Republican, I'm a Christian. But the Democrats have totally abandoned any sense of morality and civility, and it's evil. And I just don't understand how a Christian can vote for the killing of children, for open borders, for allowing this stuff in, for all of the things that the Democrats stand for. I'm just encouraging you that if you are a Christian, you need to make a stand. And I don't care if your parents and grandparents were Democrats, you need to start letting the Word of God influence you more than a political association.
Mm-hmm.
That's really
Andrew,
good.
if I could just also point out where Leah stopped. It's one thing for the longest time Christians just weren't aware that this was happening because, as you mentioned, that's not the way they think. They don't want to believe it's happening. Well, that's we passed that Rubicon now. They know it's happening. It's out there. The next question is, what do we do?
What are you gonna do?
And you can't keep saying, what are they going to do? We have to start asking what we're going to do. And that's one of the things that we've tried to do with this Faith Impact Network, is to say, here are the strategies that can move this pile. These are things you can do. Instead of just sitting at home, you can literally step up to the plate and start doing some of these things, and they will push back on some of the things you're seeing happening across the country.
And y'all are the leaders of the Congressional Prayer Caucus, so I am not against prayer, but faith without works is dead. If all you're going to do is pray and ask God to do something about this, we will lose the midterms. We need to get out and do something.
Do.
That's right.
And I really appreciate that you've got specific steps that people can take.
Yes.
This might be a good time, Richard, too. I mean, a lot of people, we get questions all the time, and how do I know who to vote for? And I think we had some voter guides come out
We
in
did.
a couple states.
Yes, so the iVoter Guide produces voter guides from a Christian perspective, a scriptural perspective, and they now have voter guides published on their website for all 49 states, and the 50th, Pennsylvania, is going to be coming out tomorrow. So as of tomorrow, all 50 states will have published voter guides available, and you can get to their website through Truth and Liberty's website. You can find on our website a little link to ivoterguide.com. It's a little blue icon, and so click on that and it'll take you there, and all you have to do is punch in your zip code and it'll pull up the voter guide for your area. So I encourage you guys to do that and vote your conscience according to biblical values.
Do you know, a question that we get every week is about people, they want to know who to vote for, but specifically, how do you navigate through judges? Because when you get that judge on your ballot, at least when I filled out my ballot, it didn't tell me if they were traditionally, conservative or liberal. So what would you recommend to our voters with those judges, because they're so crucial?
Well, Karen, one of the most important things that we can do is the casting of votes for members of the Senate right now is going to determine our federal judges, because they're all going to have to be approved, obviously nominated by the president, but they got to be confirmed by the Senate. But for those state elections, I think we're going to see in the future more and more of an expansion of the same kind of voter guides that Richard was talking about. We're behind the curve on doing that. For the longest time, a lot of these people running for these judgeships felt they could kind of slip in, as Andrew kind of mentioned. Nobody was going to be aware of that. I think we're seeing that change now. And we're seeing more and more judges around the country who saw what happened to Justice Kavanaugh, quite honestly, and they're realizing that they've got to start stepping up to the plate and taking some stands as well. So what we hope we're going to see down the road, Karen, are more and more of these same kind of voters' guides dealing with the judges as well, because that's where this game's going to be played over the next decade or so.
Oh, that is great. Okay, so we've got a question here from Kimberly, who's on Facebook, and she says there's been talk regarding issues at the polling places during early voting, problems with ballots, and some thinking that their votes have been changed. What should we look for and be aware of when we go vote? And if there is a problem, what steps should we take?
That's a great question. In almost every polling place, you're going to have both Republican and Democratic poll watchers that are there just for this kind of thing. What I tell everybody to do is, when you're going, be vigilant as you go around. Look, if it doesn't look right, it probably isn't right. Second thing is, make sure that if you're outside and something's going on wrong, you've got your phone with you and you can start videoing and taking some pictures there, because that can be incredibly important. And if you feel like something's going amok with these voting machines, you need to report it to one of those poll watchers there so that they can get that information back to the legal teams that can deal with it. And the final thing that I want to tell you, though, is you'll see the left who will have one fake story after the other about all of the terrible things that are happening in their areas to change votes or to coerce votes. Just don't buy into all of that. Make sure that you get the facts before you jump and happen to believe that those stories are really accurate and true.
That's
I've been
Great answer.
studying some of the things about communism, and one of the ways that they said to go in is you have to destabilize things. You have to make crisis, and in the atmosphere of that is when people will give up liberties to solve it. And I think that this is liberals doing it. They're trying to remove faith in our system.
Well, Andrew, that goes right back to what we were talking about earlier with the left-wing funded organizations. And Leah, you were commenting about how many organizations there are. I've seen the pie chart on that, and there's dozens of these organizations, and then they're all linked in together. But a study was done of who the leadership is in those organizations. It actually boils down to less than 20 people are the primary leaders of all those. And there's serious money behind them, but many of them come from a philosophy of communistic approach, which is to create civil unrest. It's chaos first, and that's where the instability allows an open door for them to come in and exert influence and power and demand quote unquote change. Do we remember that philosophy from the last administration? And that's exactly right. So, Christians, we can't just sit back and be passive anymore. We've got to stand up and assert the truth in the public sphere and be confident and know that, right is on our side.
Well,
and Richard, Andrew pointed out something very important, and you just did that. Their default position is always chaos, because if they can just create a chaotic situation and make people think it's chaotic, so many Christians then unfortunately just step back and say, well, we don't understand. We just want things to calm down. And unfortunately, calming down for them means that we go to the left, and then we see one after the other of our rights eroded until we wake up one day and our children don't have the same rights of religious freedom that you and I had, and our grandchildren have even less than that. That's what's so important, that we pull back that curtain and we look and say, who's really funding these things? What are they really trying to do? And then we create strategies to counter that. And that's what we're seeing around the country. So we need to be encouraged that we're seeing more and more people do that, and people of faith standing up.
And what we find is, too, in that same vein, is that people, they are expecting that people will trade their freedom for security. That's what they expect to happen. And that's why Christians, it's so important that we don't give way to fear. And we are not willing to trade security. Our security is in Christ. It's always in Christ alone. And so we can trust Him, and we can continue to stand for faith and do the right thing. And specifically what we've been talking about is every person, when you see that there is something that is not right, it is crucial, as small as it may seem, to take a strong stand, whether it be in your public library, your school, or in your community. You know it, you can feel it, you sense it, you know it, you see it, that this is not right. And most often what we do is, well, but I just need to preach salvation and not worry about the culture, or whatever excuse you might use for not taking a stand. But every time one of us does not take a stand, that's one opportunity that's missed. So every single person taking a stand, and not only that, how many times have you heard a story about somebody taking a stand and it has had a ripple effect across the nation? Because when somebody takes a stand and you hear it and you go, well, if they can do it, I can do it too. And that's what we're encouraging. He is getting the news out. And that's why what you're doing is so important, is because you're making people aware of what's happening across the nation to inspire and encourage people. Well, then I'm going to take a stand in my community too.
Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who stood against Hitler and was eventually hung by Hitler, said, not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act.
That's right.
And that's exactly where we are.
Really good.
We're drawing to a close, but I've got to say this. I've been studying in 1 Kings, and in Kings, Elijah got involved in politics. He stood up and countered the ungodliness of Ahab and called for a drought. And after 3.5 years of drought, finally, he called Ahab together, and Ahab, when he saw him, says, are you he that troubles Israel? And I love Elijah's answer. He says, it's not me, it's you and your ungodly ways that have caused the trouble.
That's awesome.
And there are people today who are saying, well, you Christians are causing this problem. You conservatives have caused this. No, it is the liberals who have pushed America totally away from our foundation and into ungodliness, where we celebrate every type of perversion that there is. And we are just now beginning to start calling America back to where it came from. So it's not us that's troubling America, it's the ungodly who are losing their grasp on the judiciary and all of these things that they've been using, and they are upset But we didn't cause it. All we're doing is trying to return back to the roots that we came from. That is very, very good.
Very good.
That's right.
We got time for one more question, I think.
Okay, so this is actually a really strong question. You know, we're in Colorado in different areas of the country, but we have got one of our viewers that lives in Texas. And what she is asking is, what do we do if that group comes over the border? Can we protect ourselves at the border because it's right there nearing their location?
Good
Well,
question.
Karen, obviously, a lot of the local laws are going to prevail where they are, what community, and who's going to enforce those laws. That's why it's such a frightening situation. And that's why, one, it's important that you have a president and administration who sends a signal out long before they get to that border, as this president has done. But that's why, our citizens are dependent upon government to take a stand and stop them, because even though they may step up and try to defend and protect themselves, there's nobody in today's world that's going to guarantee that some law enforcement agency somewhere is not going to try to prosecute them for something, even when they're just defending themselves. So that's why this is so crucial to have this fight and to make sure that we are defending and protecting those borders from a governmental position and from the law enforcement that was elected to defend it by this country.
And praise God that President Trump has said he will use whatever force he has to use to stop it. And I really like the fact that he's going to defund or quit giving aid to El Salvador and all of these places that are allowing this to happen.
Yes.
I just think that's awesome. So I really believe that we have the government on our side at this time. That's the reason you need to turn out and vote so that we don't lose this momentum that we've got. I tell you, it is crucial. So we've got less than 2 minutes, and we're going to have to close. But you know what? You need to get involved. Not only you, but use your influence to touch somebody else. Go to CPCFoundation.com and sign up and get involved in these initiatives. Go to our website and find out the voter guides. But we've got to take a stand. And also, again, would you advertise the event that's coming up on November the 4th? Because we're going to have Tony Perkins, Governor Huckabee, and a lot of other people. And I mean, this is going to be maybe hundreds of thousands of people viewing. And I think that this could make a difference in the election.
I do too. So if you want to join us live here in Colorado as part of the live audience, go to truthandliberty.net. You can also view it at your home from that same website. And if you have a group that's coming together, a church or an organization, and you want to be a host, go to the event 2018.com. And also, I just want to share, we're going to have live coverage election night. So we're going to partner with Kenneth Copeland, and David Barton and Michelle Bachman.
Right.
And so we will be here live at the midterm election evening.
So we're just about out of time. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Congressman Forbes. We appreciate all that you guys are doing.
Yes.
It's awesome. And thank you all for joining us and being a part of this. And I really believe that what we're doing right here is making a difference. Thank you for being a part of it. Share it with other people. You can go and you can watch all of this on the archives. You can share it with other people, but we've got to get people motivated. The evangelicals have to participate. So thank you for being a part of it. God bless you. And remember, we do this every Monday night. Join us again next Monday for Truth and Liberty.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net.